The clock on the dashboard read 9:47 p.m. as Damon turned his silver Honda onto Maple Street. After 12 hours at the office debugging code, all he wanted was to get home, heat up some leftover pizza, and maybe catch the end of the basketball game. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his white dress shirt was wrinkled from the long day. Damon had been working as a software engineer at TechFlow Solutions for 6 years now. Tonight had been particularly brutal with a client presentation tomorrow morning and a stubborn piece of code that refused to cooperate. His team had finally cracked it around 9, and now he was making his way through the quiet suburban streets of Willowbrook. This wasn't his usual route home. Normally, he'd take the highway, but construction had that blocked off for the next 2 weeks. His GPS had guided him through this neighborhood instead. Big houses lined both sides of the street, each one probably worth more than he'd make in 5 years. Perfect lawns, expensive cars and driveways, and those fancy mailboxes that cost more than most people's monthly grocery bills. He slowed down at a stop sign, glancing at his phone to check if his girlfriend Ashley had texted back about their weekend plans. The screen showed no new messages. She was probably already asleep since she had an early shift at the hospital tomorrow. As he accelerated through the intersection, Damon noticed a police car parked on the side street to his right. The officer inside seemed to be watching the traffic. Nothing unusual about that, he thought. Cops had to patrol somewhere, and this looked like the kind of neighborhood where residents expected to see regular police presence. He continued down Maple Street, staying exactly at the speed limit. His father had drilled this into him years ago during those awkward driving lessons when he was 16. "Always drive like you're being watched," his dad had said, "because you probably are." At the time, Damon thought his father was being paranoid. Now at 34, he understood the wisdom in those words. The radio played soft jazz, helping him unwind from the stressful day. His mind wandered to tomorrow's presentation. Everything was ready, but he still felt those familiar butterflies in his stomach. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, even though he'd gotten better at it over the years. The client was considering a major software upgrade, and landing this contract would mean a significant bonus for the whole team. In his rearview mirror, Damon noticed headlights had appeared behind him. The car seemed to be maintaining the same distance, making the same turns he was making. He told himself it was probably just another commuter taking the detour around the construction zone. At the next red light, he drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and checked his mirror again. The car behind him looked like a police cruiser, now that he could see it more clearly under the streetlights. The officer had probably finished whatever he was doing back there and was heading somewhere else. The light turned green, and Damon proceeded through the intersection. He made a left turn onto Oak Avenue, getting closer to the exit that would take him back to the main road toward his apartment. The police car made the same left turn. Now Damon's pulse quickened slightly. He told himself to stay calm. Police cars drove on public roads just like everyone else. There was no reason to think the officer was following him specifically. He hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't speeding, hadn't run any lights, and his car registration was current. His inspection sticker was good for another 8 months. Still, he found himself gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. His father's voice echoed in his mind again, but this time it was a different conversation from his teenage years. "Son, if you ever get pulled over, you keep your hands where they can see them. You be polite and respectful. You don't make any sudden movements. And you pray that the officer is having a good day." Even back then, those words had seemed heavy with meaning that Damon didn't fully grasp. His friends at school never got lectures like that from their parents. But over the years, he'd heard enough stories from other people who looked like him to understand why his father felt the need to have that conversation. The police car was still behind him as he approached the next intersection. Damon glanced at his speedometer again. 28 miles per hour in a 30 zone. Nothing wrong there. He checked his mirrors to make sure his turn signals were working properly. Everything seemed fine. His phone buzzed with a text message, but he ignored it. The last thing he needed was for an officer to think he was texting while driving. Even hands-free wasn't worth the risk right now. As he slowed for a stop sign, Damon caught a glimpse of the officer in his side mirror. The man appeared to be white, probably in his 30s or 40s with short dark hair. He was alone in the patrol car, which was standard for this area. The officer seemed to be looking directly at Damon's car with what appeared to be focused attention. Damon's mouth felt dry. He reached for the water bottle in his cup holder but stopped himself. Better to keep both hands visible on the steering wheel. The stop sign seemed to last forever, even though he'd only been stopped for a few seconds. He proceeded through the intersection, still maintaining the speed limit, still being as careful as possible. The police car continued to follow. Now there was no denying it. The officer was definitely behind him, matching his every turn, maintaining the same distance. Damon's heart rate picked up. He tried to think of any reason a police officer might want to pull him over. His license was valid. His insurance was current. He'd paid all his tickets promptly over the years, though there hadn't been many. His car was in good condition, no broken tail lights or expired tags. Maybe the officer was just heading in the same direction by coincidence. Maybe he'd turn off at the next street and this whole thing would be over. Damon could go home, eat his pizza, and forget this uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. But as he approached the next turn, the one that would take him toward the highway on-ramp, the police car's red and blue lights suddenly activated. The sight made Damon's chest tighten. Those flashing colors in his rearview mirror meant only one thing. He was being pulled over. Damon took a deep breath and started looking for a safe place to stop. His hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was racing. What had he done wrong? Why was this happening? And more importantly, how was this traffic stop going to end? The quiet suburban street was about to become the setting for an encounter that would change everything. Damon pulled his Honda to the curb slowly and deliberately, making sure to use his turn signal even though the street was empty. His father's voice was practically shouting in his head now. Keep your hands visible. Be respectful. Don't make sudden movements. He turned off the engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 o'clock, just like he'd been taught in driver's education. The police car stopped about 15 feet behind him, its red and blue lights painting the quiet neighborhood in alternating colors. A few house lights came on as curious residents peered through their windows. Officer Rodriguez stepped out of his patrol car. He was 42 years old and had been patrolling these streets for 10 years. Tonight had been relatively quiet until dispatch mentioned reports of a suspicious person in the area. The description had been vague, as they often were. Black male, possibly casing houses. That was all they'd given him. When Rodriguez spotted Damon's car driving through the neighborhood, something triggered his attention. Maybe it was the late hour, or maybe it was the fact that he didn't recognize the vehicle. In a neighborhood like Willowbrook, officers got to know the regular residents and their cars. This one didn't look familiar. Rodriguez approached the driver's side window with his flashlight in hand, though he kept it pointed downward for now. His other hand rested casually near his duty belt, a habit developed over years of traffic stops. As he got closer, he could see the driver clearly. A black man in a business suit, hands properly positioned on the steering wheel. "Good evening," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd perfected over the years. "License and registration, please." Damon's throat felt tight, but he managed to respond clearly. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my wallet in my back pocket, and the registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them slowly. Go ahead." Rodriguez nodded, watching carefully as Damon retrieved the documents. The man's movements were careful and measured, which Rodriguez appreciated. Some people got nervous during traffic stops and made erratic movements that put everyone on edge. Damon handed over his license and registration, making sure to keep his other hand visible on the steering wheel. The license showed his address in the Riverside Apartments complex about 12 miles away. The registration was current and matched the vehicle. Rodriguez examined the documents under his flashlight. Damon Williams, age 34, clean driving record as far as he could tell without running it through the system. The photo matched the man in front of him. Everything appeared to be in order, but Rodriguez still felt compelled to dig deeper. "Mr. Williams, what brings you to this neighborhood tonight?" Rodriguez asked, his tone suggesting this was more than casual conversation. "I work at TechFlow Solutions over on Commerce Street," Damon replied, keeping his voice steady. "There's construction on Highway 95, so my GPS routed me this way to get home." Rodriguez nodded but didn't seem entirely satisfied with the explanation. "It's pretty late to be getting off work." "Yes, sir, we had a big presentation to prepare for tomorrow. I'm a software engineer and we were debugging some code that was giving us trouble." The officer studied Damon's face, looking for any signs of deception. In his experience, people who were up to no good often had rehearsed stories ready, but this man seemed genuine and his explanation made sense. Still, Rodriguez decided to run the license through the system to be thorough. "I'm going to check your information. Stay in the vehicle and keep your hands visible," Rodriguez instructed as he walked back to his patrol car. Damon watched in his side mirror as the officer sat in his car, probably running his license through the computer system. This part always took the longest and felt the most nerve-wracking. Even though he knew his record was clean, there was always that nagging worry that something might come up in the system. A case of mistaken identity, a clerical error, or some old ticket he'd forgotten about. Inside the patrol car, Rodriguez typed Damon's information into the mobile data terminal. The results came back quickly. No outstanding warrants, no unpaid tickets, no criminal history. The man was exactly what he appeared to be, a working professional with a spotless record. But Rodriguez still felt uneasy about something. Maybe it was the late hour, or maybe it was the expensive neighborhood contrasted with Damon's modest car and apartment address. He'd seen plenty of cases where criminals scouted affluent areas for potential burglary targets. Rodriguez decided to call for backup. It wasn't unusual in situations like this, and having another officer present often helped clarify things. Within 5 minutes, another patrol car arrived with Officer Thompson, a younger officer with 3 years on the force. Damon's heart sank when he saw the second police car. In his experience, nothing good ever came from multiple officers showing up for a simple traffic stop. More police meant they thought he was dangerous or they suspected him of something serious. The two officers approached his car together this time. Rodriguez took the lead while Thompson positioned himself slightly behind and to the right. Standard procedure for officer safety. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," Rodriguez announced. Damon's pulse quickened. "May I ask why, officer? I've provided my license and registration, and I believe everything is in order." "Just step out of the car, please," Rodriguez repeated, his tone becoming firmer. Damon knew better than to argue. He slowly opened his door and stepped out, keeping his hands visible at all times. The cool night air hit his face as he stood beside his car, feeling exposed under the streetlights and the curious gazes of neighbors who had come to their windows. "Put your hands on the roof of the car," Thompson instructed. Damon complied, placing his palms flat on the Honda's roof. The metal was cool against his skin. He could feel the officer's eyes on him, evaluating his every movement, looking for any sign of threat or deception. Rodriguez began patting down Damon's jacket and pants, checking for weapons or contraband. The search was professional but thorough, covering all the standard areas where someone might conceal something dangerous. "What's in your jacket pockets?" Rodriguez asked. "My phone, my work badge, and some receipts from lunch," Damon answered honestly. Rodriguez removed these items, examining each one carefully. The work badge confirmed Damon's story about being employed at TechFlow Solutions. The receipts were from a sandwich shop near his office, time-stamped from earlier that day. "Where exactly were you headed tonight?" Thompson asked, joining the questioning. "Home to my apartment," Damon replied. "I live at Riverside Apartments on Miller Street." "That's pretty far from here," Thompson observed. "Why not take the highway?" "Like I told the other officer, there's construction blocking my usual route." The GPS showed this as the fastest alternate route. The officers exchanged glances. Damon's story was consistent and verifiable, but something still nagged at Rodriguez. In his 10 years of experience, he'd developed instincts about people and situations. Tonight, those instincts were telling him to be cautious. More neighbors had gathered at their windows now, and a few had even stepped onto their porches to get a better view of the scene unfolding on their quiet street. Some were recording with their phones, which made both officers slightly uncomfortable, but wasn't illegal. "Are you carrying anything illegal in your vehicle?" Rodriguez asked directly. "No, sir, absolutely not." "Would you consent to a search of your car?" Damon hesitated. He knew his rights and he knew he could refuse. But he also knew that refusing might escalate the situation and make the officers more suspicious. His car was clean, so he had nothing to hide from a search. "I guess that would be okay," Damon said reluctantly. As Rodriguez began searching the Honda, Thompson kept watch over Damon, who remained standing with his hands on the car roof. The search was methodical, covering the interior, the trunk, and even under the seats. Rodriguez found nothing suspicious. Work papers, a gym bag with clean clothes, an umbrella, some loose change, and a half-empty coffee cup from that morning. Everything you'd expect to find in the car of a working professional. The officers regrouped near their patrol cars, speaking in low voices while Damon waited by his Honda. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language suggested they were debating their next move. After what felt like an eternity, the officers returned. Rodriguez handed Damon back his license and registration. "Everything appears to be in order," Rodriguez said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely happy about it. "Am I free to go?" Damon asked. "Yes, but drive safely and stick to main roads," Rodriguez replied. As Damon got back into his car, he felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that the encounter was over, but frustration that it had happened at all. He'd done nothing wrong, yet he'd been treated like a suspect for nearly 30 minutes. But as he started his engine and prepared to drive away, Damon had no idea that this traffic stop was far from over. In fact, the most important part was just beginning. As Damon put his car in drive, his phone buzzed with a text message. The sound seemed unusually loud in the quiet aftermath of the traffic stop. Both officers were still standing near their patrol cars, apparently finishing up their paperwork, when they noticed him glance at his phone. Rodriguez walked back over to Damon's window. "Everything okay?" Damon looked at the message and felt his stomach drop. It was from Kevin, one of the kids from the community center. "Coach D, where are you?" "We've been waiting for an hour." "Did something happen?" "Actually, officer," Damon said, looking up from his phone with genuine concern in his voice. "I'm supposed to be somewhere right now. There are kids waiting for me." Rodriguez's expression immediately shifted to suspicion. "Kids? What kids? Where?" The way he said it made Damon's heart sink. He could practically see the officer's mind racing to dark places, making assumptions about why a grown man would be meeting children at this hour. "I volunteer at the Riverside Community Center," Damon explained quickly. "I run a coding program for teenagers. We had a session scheduled for 9:30 tonight." Thompson had walked over during this exchange and was now listening intently. Both officers wore expressions that clearly showed they didn't believe what they were hearing. "You're telling me you teach computer programming to kids at almost 11 at night?" Rodriguez asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. "It's not that unusual," Damon said, trying to keep his voice calm despite his growing frustration. "A lot of these kids have after-school jobs or family responsibilities. The evening sessions work better for their schedules." Rodriguez exchanged another look with Thompson. In their experience, adults who sought out private time with children often had ulterior motives. The late hour and the vague explanation weren't helping Damon's case. "What's the name of this community center?" Thompson asked, pulling out his notepad. "Riverside Community Center on Miller Street. It's run by Mrs. Patterson. She's been the director there for 15 years. Rodriguez was already walking back to his patrol car to make a phone call. If this story was true, it would be easy enough to verify. If it was false, they'd know soon enough. Meanwhile, Damon's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Ashley, his girlfriend. She was probably wondering why he wasn't home yet. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was being detained while kids who actually needed him were sitting in a community center wondering where he was. "Officer, can I please call the center and let them know I'm running late?" Damon asked Thompson, who was still standing nearby. "Not right now," Thompson replied firmly. "Let's wait and see what my partner finds out." Rodriguez was having a conversation with someone on his phone, but Damon couldn't make out the words. The officer's body language was tense, and he seemed to be asking a lot of questions. After about 5 minutes, Rodriguez hung up and walked back over. "I just spoke with the night security guard at the community center," Rodriguez announced. "He confirmed there's a computer class tonight and that the instructor hasn't shown up yet." Damon felt a wave of relief wash over him. Finally, someone could confirm his story, but Rodriguez wasn't finished. However, he couldn't confirm who the instructor is supposed to be. He said Mrs. Patterson would know, but she's not there tonight. The relief evaporated as quickly as it had come. Damon realized he was still under suspicion despite the partial confirmation of his story. "Look, you can call Mrs. Patterson at home," Damon suggested. "I have her number in my phone. Or you can call the center's main line tomorrow morning. There are records of all the volunteer programs." Thompson shook his head. "We're not calling random people in the middle of the night based on numbers you give us." Damon's phone buzzed again. Another text from Kevin. "Coach D, should we wait longer? Some kids had to leave already because their parents came to pick them up." The message hit Damon hard. These weren't just any kids waiting for him. They were teenagers from tough neighborhoods who had found something positive to focus on. His coding program was more than just education for them. It was hope. It was a chance to see that there were paths out of poverty that didn't involve drugs or crime. "Officer, please," Damon said, his voice carrying genuine emotion now. "These kids are depending on me. Can't you just follow me to the community center? You can see for yourself that I'm telling the truth." Rodriguez considered this suggestion. It would be easy enough to verify Damon's story by going to the location, but it would also mean extending this traffic stop even longer, and he was already questioning whether they had sufficient grounds to detain this man any further. "What exactly do you teach these kids?" Thompson asked. "Basic programming, web design, some app development. A lot of them have never had access to computers beyond what they get at school. The program gives them skills they can use for college applications or even entry-level tech jobs." The explanation sounded genuine, but both officers remained skeptical. In their line of work, they'd heard countless stories from people trying to explain away suspicious behavior. Rodriguez made a decision. "All right, we'll follow you to this community center, but I want to make something clear. If this turns out to be some kind of fabrication, you're going to face serious consequences." "I understand, officer. Thank you." As they prepared to drive to the community center, Rodriguez called for a third unit to meet them there. Standard procedure when investigating potential crimes involving children required additional backup and supervision. The short convoy of vehicles made its way through the quiet streets toward Miller Street. Damon led the way in his Honda, followed by 2 patrol cars. He felt nervous about what the officers might think when they saw the community center. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, and the building itself was old and showed signs of wear. The Riverside Community Center had been serving the local community for over 30 years. It occupied a converted warehouse that had been donated by a local business owner who wanted to give something back to the area where he'd grown up. The building's exterior was painted a cheerful yellow, though the paint was peeling in places. A hand-painted sign announced the center's name and listed its hours of operation. When they arrived, Damon could see through the large windows that there were indeed teenagers inside. About 8 kids were sitting around tables with laptops, clearly waiting for something to begin. The sight of the police cars pulling up caught their attention immediately. Rodriguez and Thompson got out of their vehicles and approached the building's entrance. The security guard, an elderly man named Frank, was already coming outside to see what was happening. "Evening, officers," Frank said. "Is there some kind of problem?" "We're following up on the computer class that's supposed to be happening tonight," Rodriguez explained. "This man claims he's the instructor." Frank looked at Damon, who was standing between the 2 officers. Recognition dawned on his face immediately. "Oh, that's Coach D," Frank said with obvious relief. "Yeah, he runs the coding program every Tuesday and Thursday night. The kids have been asking about him for the past hour." Rodriguez felt something shift in his chest. The casual way the security guard identified Damon, using what was clearly a familiar nickname, suggested a level of relationship that would be difficult to fake. "How long has he been coming here?" Thompson asked. "Oh, must be going on 5 years now," Frank replied. "Real good with the kids. They love him. He's gotten several of them into college with scholarships and everything." Through the windows, the officers could see the teenagers inside starting to get excited. They had spotted Damon and were waving at him through the glass. Their reactions looked completely natural and genuinely happy to see him. One of the kids, a 17-year-old named Alex, came outside despite Frank's attempt to keep everyone inside until the situation was resolved. "Coach D, where have you been? We thought something happened to you," Alex said, his concern evident. Rodriguez watched this interaction carefully. The teenager's reaction seemed completely authentic. There was no fear or hesitation in his approach to Damon. Instead, there was the kind of familiarity and respect that develops between a mentor and student over time. "I'm sorry I'm late," Damon told Alex. "There was a misunderstanding, but everything's okay now." Thompson was beginning to feel uncomfortable about the situation. The evidence was mounting that they had detained an innocent man who was simply trying to do something positive for his community. Rodriguez was experiencing his own internal conflict. As the reality of the situation became clear, he started to question the assumptions he'd made during the traffic stop. What had really prompted him to pull Damon over in the first place? And why had he been so quick to suspect something sinister about a man meeting with teenagers for educational purposes? As more pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Rodriguez realized that this encounter was about to teach him something important about his own biases and assumptions. The lesson was going to be more powerful than anything he'd learned in his 10 years of police training. Rodriguez stood outside the community center, watching as more teenagers gathered around Damon. Their genuine excitement and relief at seeing him was impossible to fake. These weren't the reactions of kids who were afraid or uncomfortable around an adult. These were students happy to see their teacher. "Coach D, we've been working on that website project you gave us," said Maya, a 16-year-old with bright pink highlights in her hair. "I figured out how to make the navigation menu work, but I'm stuck on the contact form." Damon's face lit up with pride. "That's fantastic, Maya. The navigation was the hardest part. We'll get that contact form working tonight." Thompson watched this exchange and felt a growing sense of unease about their actions tonight. The more he observed, the more obvious it became that they had made a serious error in judgment. Frank, the security guard, approached Rodriguez. "Officer, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what exactly did you think Coach D had done wrong?" The question hit Rodriguez like a punch to the gut. What had Damon done wrong? Driving through a neighborhood? Being black in an affluent area? Working late and taking an alternate route home? "We received reports of suspicious activity in the area," Rodriguez said, though the words felt hollow as they left his mouth. "Suspicious how?" Frank pressed gently. "This man has been volunteering here for years. He's probably helped more kids in this community than most people help in their entire lives." As if to prove Frank's point, another teenager joined the group outside. This was Jordan, 18 years old and clearly excited about something. "Coach D, I got the acceptance letter today," Jordan announced, waving an envelope. "Full scholarship to State University for computer science. I couldn't wait until Thursday to tell you." Damon's face broke into a huge smile as he pulled the young man into a congratulatory hug. "Jordan, that's incredible. I knew you could do it. All those extra hours practicing coding really paid off." Rodriguez felt his chest tighten as he watched this celebration. Here was concrete evidence of the positive impact Damon had on these young people's lives. A full scholarship to university was a life-changing opportunity, especially for a kid from this neighborhood. "How many students has Coach D helped get into college?" Thompson asked Frank. "Oh, I've lost count," Frank replied, "but it's got to be over 20 in the past few years. Some with full scholarships like Jordan here. Others just got the boost they needed to qualify for financial aid. He doesn't just teach them computer skills. He helps them with college applications, teaches them interview skills, even helps some of them get part-time jobs at tech companies." The weight of what they had done was becoming clear to both officers. They had detained a man who was actively working to improve his community, who was providing opportunities for disadvantaged youth, who was making a real difference in people's lives. Rodriguez pulled Thompson aside. "We need to talk," he said quietly. The two officers walked a short distance away from the group gathered around Damon. "I think we screwed up," Thompson said before Rodriguez could speak. "Yeah, we did," Rodriguez admitted. "The question is, what do we do about it now?" Thompson looked back at the scene near the community center entrance. More kids had come outside, and Damon was in the middle of an animated conversation about some programming concept, using his hands to gesture as he explained something technical. "We apologize," Thompson said. "We own up to our mistake and we apologize." He nodded, but he was struggling with something deeper than just admitting an error. The encounter had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his own assumptions and biases. When he'd first spotted Damon driving through Willowbrook, what had really triggered his suspicion? As he watched Damon interact with the teenagers, Rodriguez began to see the man differently. Not as a potential threat or suspect, but as a dedicated volunteer who had been pulled away from important work to deal with an unnecessary traffic stop. One of the younger kids, maybe 14 years old, approached the officers. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you guys here to learn about coding too? Coach D is really good at explaining things." The innocent question from Tyler hit Rodriguez harder than any criticism could have. This kid saw police officers and assumed they might be there for something positive, something educational. He had no idea that they had just spent an hour treating his mentor like a criminal. "No, son," Rodriguez replied gently. "We were just making sure everything was okay here." "Oh, cool," Tyler said. Coach D always tells us that police officers are here to help the community. He says we should always be respectful and cooperative if we ever have to talk to you guys. Thompson felt like he might be sick. Here was a young man from a neighborhood where police relationships were often strained, and yet he spoke about officers with respect and trust. That trust was clearly something Damon had helped foster. Rodriguez made a decision. He walked back over to where Damon was standing with the group of students. "Mr. Williams," Rodriguez said formally, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Damon nodded and followed the officer a few steps away from the teenagers. "I owe you an apology," Rodriguez began. "We made assumptions tonight that were unfair and unfounded. You were doing nothing wrong, and we treated you like a suspect when you're clearly a pillar of this community." Damon listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "I've been a police officer for 10 years, Rodriguez continued. "I pride myself on treating people fairly and professionally. But tonight I let my preconceptions cloud my judgment. That's on me and I'm sorry." "I appreciate the apology, officer," Damon replied. "But can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What made you decide to pull me over in the first place?" "I know I wasn't speeding or driving erratically. My tags are current, my lights work. What was it that made you suspicious?" The question hung in the air between them. Rodriguez knew the honest answer, but saying it out loud would require admitting something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. "I don't know," Rodriguez said finally. "I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but I honestly don't know what triggered my initial suspicion." Damon nodded slowly. "I think you do know, officer. You're just not ready to say it yet." The simple statement hit Rodriguez like a revelation. Damon was right. He did know what had prompted the traffic stop, but acknowledging it would mean confronting some uncomfortable truths about himself and his policing methods. "You're right," Rodriguez admitted quietly, "and that's something I need to work on." Thompson had been watching this conversation from a distance, and now he approached the two men. "Mr. Williams, I want to add my apology to Officer Rodriguez's," Thompson said. "What we did tonight was wrong, and there's no excuse for it." Damon looked at both officers for a long moment. "You know what the hardest part of this whole thing is?" he asked. "It's going back in there and explaining to those kids why their coding class got delayed. Some of them had to leave already because their parents came to pick them up. This program might be the most important thing in their week, and tonight they missed it because of a traffic stop that never should have happened." The impact of those words was devastating to both officers. They hadn't just inconvenienced one man. Their actions had ripple effects that affected an entire group of young people who were depending on the educational opportunity Damon provided. Rodriguez looked through the windows at the teenagers who were still waiting patiently for their class to begin. Some were showing each other projects on their laptops. Others were helping younger kids with homework. All of them were engaged in positive, constructive activities under Damon's leadership. "Is there anything we can do to make this right?" Rodriguez asked. Damon considered the question carefully. "Well," he said slowly, "you could start by understanding what this program actually means to these kids." He gestured toward the community center. Most of these teenagers have never seen a computer outside of school. Some of them come from families where no one has ever gone to college. This coding program isn't just about learning technical skills. It's about showing them that there are opportunities out there they never knew existed. Rodriguez and Thompson listened intently as Damon continued. "When Jordan got that scholarship letter today, it wasn't just about the money, though. That's obviously important. It was about proving to himself and his family that he could achieve something they thought was impossible. That's what education can do when someone believes in you and gives you the tools to succeed." As Damon spoke, Rodriguez began to understand the full scope of what they had interrupted tonight. This wasn't just a computer class. It was a beacon of hope for young people who needed to see that their futures could be different from their present circumstances. Rodriguez stood there for a moment, taking in everything Damon had said. The weight of the evening's events was settling on his shoulders, but instead of feeling defensive, he felt something else entirely: curiosity. "Mr. Williams," Rodriguez said slowly, "would it be possible for me to observe one of your classes? I mean, if you're comfortable with that." Damon looked surprised. "Tonight? If that's okay. I'd like to understand what I interrupted." Thompson nodded in agreement. "I'd like to see it too, if you don't mind." Damon glanced back at the teenagers waiting inside the community center. Several of them were watching the conversation through the windows, clearly wondering when their class would finally start. "All right," Damon said, "but I need you to understand something. These kids come from neighborhoods where interactions with police aren't always positive. If you're going to be in there, I need you to just be people, not officers. Can you do that?" Both men nodded. Rodriguez felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. In 10 years of policing, he'd responded to calls at community centers before, but always for problems. Break-ins, fights, drug incidents. He'd never been inside one for something positive. As they entered the building, the teenagers looked up with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The presence of police officers clearly made some of them uncomfortable. "Everyone, I want you to meet Officers Rodriguez and Thompson," Damon announced to the group. "They're going to observe our class tonight to learn more about what we do here." Maya, the girl with pink highlights, raised her hand tentatively. "Are we in trouble for something?" "Not at all," Rodriguez answered quickly. "We're here because we're interested in learning about your program." Frank, the security guard, helped by setting up 2 additional chairs at the back of the room where the officers could sit, without disrupting the class. As Damon began the evening's lesson, Rodriguez found himself fascinated by what he witnessed. The class started with Damon reviewing the previous week's assignment. Each student had been working on creating a personal website, and they took turns showing their progress. The enthusiasm in the room was infectious. Kids who might struggle in traditional academic settings were lighting up as they demonstrated their coding skills. "Tyler, show us what you did with the photo gallery," Damon encouraged. The 14-year-old who had spoken to the officers earlier pulled up his website on the large monitor at the front of the room. He had created a site showcasing his neighborhood, but instead of focusing on its problems, he had highlighted its strengths. Photos of local murals, community gardens, and small businesses filled the screen. "I wanted to show people that our neighborhood isn't just what they see on the news," Tyler explained. "There's a lot of good stuff here too." Rodriguez felt a lump form in his throat. This kid was using technology to change the narrative about his community, to show pride in where he came from while working towards something better. As the class progressed, Rodriguez began to see patterns he'd never noticed before. These weren't just kids learning to code. They were developing problem-solving skills, gaining confidence, and learning to see themselves as capable of achieving things they'd never imagined possible. Jordan, the student who had received the scholarship, was helping younger kids troubleshoot their code. "Remember what Coach D always says," Jordan told a frustrated 12-year-old. "Every error message is just the computer trying to help you fix something. It's not saying you're wrong, it's showing you where to look." The philosophy extended beyond programming. Rodriguez could see that Damon was teaching these kids to approach challenges in their lives the same way they approached bugs in their code. Break the problem down into smaller pieces. Try different solutions. Don't give up when something doesn't work the first time. About halfway through the class, Damon introduced a new concept: collaborative programming. He paired up students of different skill levels and had them work together on projects. "Rodriguez, in the real world, programmers don't work alone," Damon explained. "You'll be part of teams, and everyone brings different strengths to the table." Rodriguez watched as a 17-year-old named Carlos patiently helped 10-year-old Jasmine understand loops in her code. The older student had clearly done this before, breaking down complex concepts into simple terms that a younger child could grasp. "Programming teaches you patience," Carlos explained to Jasmine. "And it teaches you that there's always more than one way to solve a problem." Thompson leaned over to Rodriguez. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Look how engaged these kids are." It was true. Despite the late hour and the disruption to their schedule, every student in the room was focused and enthusiastic. Some had been there since 7 o'clock, yet none of them seemed tired or ready to leave. As the class worked on their projects, Damon moved around the room, offering individual guidance and encouragement. Rodriguez noticed that his approach with each student was slightly different, tailored to their personality and learning style. With Maya, he challenged her to think beyond what she thought was possible. "You've mastered the basics faster than anyone I've ever taught," he told her. "Let's see if we can get you ready for some advanced frameworks." With Tyler, he focused on building confidence. "Your design sense is really developing," Damon observed. "Have you thought about exploring graphic design along with your coding skills?" With Jordan, who was preparing for college, the conversations were about real-world applications. The project you're working on would make a great addition to your portfolio, Damon suggested. College admissions committees love to see practical applications of technical skills. Rodriguez began to understand why these kids called him Coach D. Like a good coach, Damon wasn't just teaching skills. He was developing character, building confidence, and helping each student discover their own potential. Near the end of the class, Damon asked the students to share one thing they had learned that night. The responses revealed the depth of what was happening in this room. I learned that making mistakes in code is normal and it doesn't mean you're not smart, said Jasmine. I learned that I can help teach other people, even though I'm still learning myself, Carlos added. When it was Tyler's turn, he looked directly at the two officers sitting in the back of the room. I learned that sometimes people make assumptions about you, but if you keep working hard and doing good things, the truth comes out eventually. The comment wasn't accusatory, but it hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. This 14-year-old had just summarized the entire evening's events with more wisdom than Rodriguez had shown in his 10 years of police work. As the class wound down and students began packing up their laptops, several of them approached the officers. Do you guys want to see what I'm working on? Maya asked, showing them a website she was building for a local nonprofit organization. This is really impressive, Thompson said, genuinely amazed by the sophistication of her work. Coach D says that if we're going to learn these skills, we should use them to help our community, Maya explained. That's why I'm building this site for free. The organization helps homeless families, but their old website was really hard to use. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that Damon's program was about much more than coding. It was about using technology as a tool for social good, about giving young people agency and improving their own communities. As the students filed out of the building, many of them stopped to say goodbye to their teacher. The respect and affection in these interactions was obvious. These kids didn't just see Damon as an instructor. They saw him as a mentor, a role model, and a source of hope for their futures. After the last student had left, Rodriguez, Thompson, and Damon found themselves alone in the classroom. The silence stretched for a moment before Rodriguez spoke. I owe you more than an apology, Rodriguez said. I owe you an education about what community policing really means. Damon looked curious. What do you mean? I've been patrolling these neighborhoods for 10 years and I thought I knew what was going on here. But tonight showed me that I've been missing the most important part of the story. I've been so focused on problems that I never took the time to see the solutions. Thompson nodded in agreement. Those kids in there tonight, they're not the kids we usually encounter in our work, but they're from the same neighborhoods, the same families. The difference is they have someone who believes in them and gives them opportunities. Rodriguez looked around the classroom, taking in the computers, the motivational posters, and the project displays that showed months of student work. Mr. Williams, can I ask you something? Rodriguez said. How did you get started doing this? Damon leaned against one of the tables. 5 years ago, I was driving through this neighborhood after work, just like tonight. But instead of getting pulled over, I stopped at a red light and saw a group of kids hanging out on a corner. They looked bored, like they had nothing to do and nowhere to go. He gestured around the room. I started thinking about how different my life might have been if I hadn't had access to computers and education. So I contacted Mrs. Patterson about starting a program. We started with 4 kids and 2 old computers. Now we have 25 regular students and we've helped dozens of them get into college or find good jobs. Rodriguez felt a profound shift happening in his understanding of community policing. What would it take to expand this program? More volunteers, better equipment, and more space, Damon replied immediately. There's a waiting list of kids who want to join, but we're limited by resources. Rodriguez looked at Thompson, and both men seemed to reach the same conclusion at the same time. What if police officers volunteered to help? Rodriguez asked. Not in uniform, not as cops, just as community members who want to support what you're doing here. Damon studied both men's faces, trying to gauge whether this was a genuine offer or just something they were saying to feel better about the evening's events. Are you serious? Damon asked. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Rodriguez replied. Tonight has shown me that I need to be part of the solution, instead of just responding to problems after they've already happened. Thompson nodded enthusiastically. I'd love to help. I don't know much about programming, but I could learn, and maybe there are other ways to contribute. Damon smiled for the first time since the traffic stop had begun hours earlier. Well, we could definitely use the help. And I think it would be good for the kids to see police officers in a different context. As they walked out of the community center together, Rodriguez felt like he was seeing his neighborhood through new eyes. The same streets he'd patrolled for a decade looked different now. Instead of just seeing potential problems, he was starting to see potential solutions. The traffic stop that had begun with suspicion and assumptions was ending with partnership and hope. Rodriguez and Thompson had learned more about effective community policing in 3 hours than they had in years of traditional training. Most importantly, they had discovered that sometimes the best way to serve and protect a community is to learn from the people who are already making it better, one coding lesson at a time. 6 months later, Officer Rodriguez would be teaching basic computer skills to elementary students every Saturday morning at the community center. Thompson would be helping teenagers with college applications and job interviews, and Damon's program would have expanded to serve twice as many students. Thanks to partnerships with local law enforcement and businesses, the traffic stop that could have damaged trust between police and community instead became the foundation for a collaboration that would change lives for years to come. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the moments when we're forced to confront our own assumptions and choose whether to defend them or grow beyond them.